Now though, Professor Regan gets to the bottom of some kiddie claims.
What if just listening to Mozart could make you more intelligent? Apparently it could. It's called the Mozart effect.
I've typed in Mozart effect into the Google search engine and I've got 364,000 hits. And the first one is Wikipedia, which is always a good start. Rauscher and Shaw, a paper in 1993. So on Amazon there are lots of different hits. The Mozart effect for newborns, tune up your mind.
So can music act on the brain to increase mental performance? Neuroscientist Dr. Jessica Grahn at Cambridge University has studied the brains of hundreds of people while they listen to music.
So just do a metal check. Now you've got nothing left.
In order to see if music changes the brain, Dr. Grahn is going to travel inside the mind of Professor Leslie Regan.
So we'll talk to you through the headphones in just a second, okay?
While Professor Regan is in the scanner, Dr. Grahn will play her some music and observe how her brain responds.
So what we have here is just a simple 3-shot scan, and this gives us a rough idea of what the shape and size of Leslie's brain is. One of the areas we're interested in is the cerebellum, which is this structure here that's involved in motor planning and feedback. We're also very interested in the auditory cortex, which is along the side of the brain, very close to the ears. Okay, Leslie, how are you doing in there? Great. So we're going to start the music listening part of the task now. It's important you remain very still during the scan. It's a bit like taking a long-range picture through the camera where if you move at all it gets a bit blurry. So the green is the areas responsive to music listening, and what we see is very strong response in the auditory cortex, right by the ears, and that's responding to the complex sounds that are coming in. Okay, all done. Steve's gonna come get you out now.
Professor Regan's brain does respond to the music, but is it making her more intelligent?
Well, the only studies that have been done on this have shown a small effect that's temporary, and this effect has been shown to be due to not the music specifically, but the fact that when we listen to music, it makes us generally feel a bit happier and makes us feel a bit more alert.
So it's a mood enhancer, isn't it?
Exactly. So actually having a cup of coffee will produce the same sort of effects.
You said temporary, but how temporary is temporary? Is it 15 minutes, or is it just the duration of the listening, or is it a year, or what?
It's about 15 minutes. Most of the studies don't show any effect that persists beyond that time frame. One of the studies I really enjoyed played music by the band Blur to 10 and 11-year-olds and found a blur effect similar to the Mozart effect. So no, it doesn't have to be specific types of music, as long as it's music that's engaging and that you enjoy.
So Professor Regan's passion for Mozart, or even Blur, isn't going to make her any more intelligent. But there are some people whose brains really have been altered purely by the power of music. Carolyn Whiting has been playing the violin for 20 years. She started learning at the tender age of 4. Dr. Grahn thinks she can prove her brain is very different to Professor Regan's.
Okay, so in your scan we saw lots of the same activity on both sides of the brain, but what I think I'm seeing hints of here that I didn't see in your scan are motor areas. See that green blob? Now we didn't see that in your scan, and that's an area that's known to be active when you're imagining playing music.
So I'm physically thinking to myself that I'm doing it.
Exactly, she might be in Carnegie Hall for all we know.
So are there differences between musicians' brains and non-musicians?
Yes, there do seem to be, at a group level, some structural differences. The white matter tract that allows the two hemispheres to communicate, particularly the two parts of the brain that are involved in coordinating movement. If you've started an instrument before the age of 7, that tract is actually likely to be a bit bigger if you're a musician.
What about the actual grey matter?
Yes, there's some indication that there's denser grey matter in auditory cortex and potentially some motor areas. A little bit more research will have to be done to make sure that this is an effect that extends to all musicians, not just the ones that were tested for that particular study.
So musicians' brains are different. Other controlled studies have shown that children who play music have a slightly higher IQ. But over the past 15 years, there have been a growing number of CDs and books which state that just listening to Mozart can make you smarter. Professor Regan contacted the author of the original paper often quoted on Mozart effect products, Dr. Rauscher. She said,
The Mozart effect is an example of how science and the media mix, and of how easy it is for industry to capitalise on the resulting confusion. A suggestion in a few paragraphs of a scientific journal becomes a universal truth in a matter of months. Listening to Mozart will not make anyone smarter, and products making that claim are wrongly playing on parents' innocent hopes for a better life for their children.
So even the author of the scientific paper quoted on many products doesn't think just listening to Mozart can affect intelligence. 4 years after that paper was published, the term Mozart effect was trademarked by Don Campbell. He has a range of books and CDs that sell the enticing idea that just listening to Mozart could make your child smarter. Professor Regan wants to ask him one thing. What is the scientific evidence for his claims that listening to Mozart changes the brain and improves mental performance?
Good morning, this is Don Campbell.
Oh, good morning. This is Professor Leslie Regan speaking, calling you from London.
Good morning to you.
Don, if I may call you that. We'd very much like to talk to you about your books, The Mozart Effect, and to ask you about the evidence that you have that this Mozart effect actually works.
Well, the most exciting thing is I wrote those books 10 to 12 years ago. The Mozart effect, as I have always defined it, was much larger than just one piece of music of Mozart. It started with...
Don Campbell believes that playing a musical instrument can improve IQ.
Just for a moment.
And that's something Professor Regan has found to be true. She's more interested in another point he makes in his books.
But in your book, specifically on page 8, you're talking about by learning to recognise and consciously implement the Mozart effect in your child's life, you can begin to communicate and connect with him, even before he's born, stimulate brain growth in the womb and throughout early childhood. So my question, and I have a background in medicine, where is the evidence that actually that the brain is growing in response to listening to music?
Is connecting.
But my problem, Don, is that I'm not able to find the data which can convince me that it's going to be long-term.
What is there? The best long-term data is integrating music with processes such as autism, dyslexia, forms of speech and communication, head injury.
But where are the hard data that shows that a child or an adult's IQ goes up?
You cannot give IQ tests to young children in the same way. You can look at the way...
No, but that's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand the methodology you've used to come to those conclusions.
It is through hundreds of observations, and I'm very happy to direct you to the right people in different fields that are the absolute specialists.
No, I'd love to receive that information, and I will follow it up.
I'm really quite serious about this, because
excellent.
Art heals in its own way. It heals our soul. No scientist will speak of these things because they're immeasurable. It's about a quality of life. And it's
well, I think that's a lovely point to end on, that art heals the soul. Thank you very much indeed, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well,
What do you think of that?
Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground. We went all over the place. But I haven't got any information over and above what I've already read that can convince me that music, particularly Mozart, is actually changing. Well, I kept asking him the same question: how does it alter the brain? Because the wording in these books, it actually states alters the brain, and I think that it is a bit misleading, because most readers, when they read that, they imagine that something is changed physically in their brain. And I think that his responses to the question, which was a repeated question from me, suggests that there are no studies that have documented that.
None of the further information Professor Regan was sent convinced her just listening to music could have a long-term effect on children's brains. So listening to Mozart to improve mental performance doesn't make it in. There is evidence that playing a musical instrument does increase IQ by a few points, so music lessons will be available in her nursery.